Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the Power Within podcast. My name is Trevor Evers. I'm your host. And folks, if you have an interest in the power of the mind, if you're passionate about your mindset, or if you're a hypnotherapist out there looking to improve your skills and looking to fine-tune the work that you're doing in your practice, then this is the podcast for you. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share, because I have so many great guests on the podcast, and today is no different. Absolutely fantastic guest, one of the best hypnotherapists in the world over the last 40 years. His name is Stephen Brooks. He is a member of the British Hypnosis Research and Training Institute, and he is a trainer, author, and he hones in on the Ericksonian model of hypnotherapy, continuing the great work of Milton Erickson, that Richard Bandler and more of the greats in the field have been pursuing over the years. And I'm delighted to have Stephen on the show here today. Stephen, it's fantastic to have you on. How are you, my friend?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Great stuff. And as I mentioned in the introduction, like, you're doing this work now for 40 years, and you obviously have a passion for the work that you do.
Well,
You're doing it this long.
I think the important thing is, if you have a job that gives you the satisfaction that you're making a difference to the lives of others in some way, it becomes almost addictive, because the worst thing would be to look back over your career and think that you didn't make a difference. And being a hypnotherapist is an amazing responsibility. First of all, someone gives you their life for 1 hour, and you can influence the rest of their life. To look over your life and think, okay, I didn't make a difference, I just did a job, that must be terrible, and I don't want to have that regret. And not having done something, added something to the world. And I think that's true of all hypnotherapists. If they're in it for the right reason, that's their outcome, to be able to know that they did something and help people. So, it's not a chore, it's not a job. I don't get tired doing that, because I guess you just feel that you're making a difference in some way, quite often in a very deep personal way. And I think that's enough. But even if you're not paid for it, I think it's a lot of people do this without being paid for it. And it's about your commitment, if you like, to healing and helping others.
Sure. And your road is long. I mean, you've written, is it 3 books you've written?
Well, people have written books about me.
Yeah. Very good.
There are books, yeah, but I didn't write them. They've been written about my work.
Okay, good stuff. Mm-hmm. And you're somebody that definitely continues the great work of Milton Erickson, and more recently it's Richard Bandler, and great hypnotherapists like that are focused in on the Ericksonian model of hypnotherapy primarily, right? Would you like to, for those that don't know, tell us a little bit about that model and the whole differences between, the direct and indirect suggestion and so on?
Yeah. Well, Milton Erickson was a psychiatrist and hypnotherapist in America, based mainly professionally in Phoenix, in Arizona. And he had polio, he was disabled, and he had to find ways of getting people to help him when he was disabled, but in a way that he didn't feel he was asking for help. He was quite modest. He didn't really want to ask people to do this and do that and do this and do that. So he created a way of implying what he wanted. So the friends and family would find themselves helping him without quite knowing why they were doing it. It was quite manipulative, if you like, but he learned to be able to make a difference indirectly to people's lives because of his problems. And he started using those same techniques in his work as a therapist, as a hypnotherapist. and he found that he was getting better responses, that he was getting people were more able easily to go into trance, for example, hypnotic trance, using this approach. And it kind of makes sense if you just look at it from outside. You know, if you're very direct with somebody and you're telling them they're going to go into hypnosis, there can be a little bit of fear on the part of the client or the patient. You know, will I be able to do it, et cetera, et cetera. So that's not really a nice state to be in, an anxious state like that. You really want them to be very relaxed. So just knowing that they're going to be hypnotized can actually prevent them going in because of their concern, you know, especially if they're familiar with demonstrations of stage hypnosis and on television or things they've read in the media. So Erickson developed this way of being much more indirect. He wouldn't tell people to go into trance. He would create a state, maybe through a story, metaphor, or joke even, that would create a kind of an automatic, spontaneous, brief trance. You know, if you laugh at a joke, if you think about laughing at a joke, when you're laughing at that joke, what is that state? You switch everything else off. You're not aware of what's going on around you. You're fully engrossed in that experience. And so he managed to identify these naturally occurring trance states that everybody has, whether it's when they're absorbed in reading a book, watching TV, playing music, listening to music. And then he would home in on that state and create it. And then he'd start working hypnotically. And so what he discovered was that people would go into trance very quickly and very easily and comfortably, not because they felt it was being done to them, but because they felt they were responsive. They were very responsive to the hypnosis, like they're going into trance and the guy hasn't even started doing the therapy yet or the hypnosis yet. I must be a good hypnotic subject. I'm going to get benefit out of this. So it's very different from going to a hypnotherapist who gives you commands to do things, even if they do it in a nice way. You know, I'm not talking about being authoritarian, although some of them are, of course, but they're being very gentle. But it's still me doing something to you. It's therapist has power over the client, and that's what the client perceives it to be. So for me personally, you know, when I first started studying hypnosis, it was all of the direct stuff. I didn't actually practice any of that. I just rejected it completely. I thought it was disempowering. I didn't like the idea of helping people by being somebody who can do something to them. It has some kind of control or power. I thought that was totally wrong for me personally. Now, it's not wrong, obviously, for a lot of people who they still have that approach. And I was really taken with Erickson's approach. I just thought, wow, this is what I've been looking for. And this was back in the 1970s, you know, when I started doing this. And
very good. Very good.
It empowers people if they feel that they're the one doing the work, they're the one actually making themselves better in the presence of a therapist who's observing and guiding, rather than they're responding to somebody who has this kind of power. So
and it's not only hypnotherapists that can benefit from it, of course. I mean, if you're a parent with young children, you can utilize the same principles, can't you, to get a better outcome of the behavior from your children.
Or teacher, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a shame that hypnosis has this kind of image where it's manipulative and it's negative in a lot of ways, because it would be amazing to have it in education. You know, trance allows you to absorb information much more effectively and recall it much more effectively. I mean, it's amazing. And I can't see it ever happening, but it may do, but I don't think so. But it's a shame.
Sure. But it's not something that children are taught in schools, unfortunately, how to control their, you know, their thoughts and manage their emotions. And this can affect, obviously, them then when they leave school, that they don't have the, you know, the tools and techniques to do that.
It's really, I mean, if it was relabeled as something else other than hypnosis, a lot of the techniques we use in hypnosis could be applied in the classroom. I mean, you know, I live in Thailand, which is a Buddhist country, and here the school children are taught how to handle their emotions, and they practice mindfulness, they practice meditation. If you go to, I mean, I was in a school out in the countryside a while back, and I turned up at lunchtime, and all the children were in the hall. They're all meditating. They'd had their lunch and they sat down and they're all meditating.
Right. Brilliant.
And this is quite amazing.
Amazing.
It
Yeah.
creates people who are more tolerant, more respectful, and more appreciative of other people, etc., etc. So it is possible, but it's a different name, of course. It's meditation, which is actually different, of course, but
Sure.
it's
Sure.
it's similar in that it creates
Sure.
better quality citizens, if you like.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually done a video on a similar topic recently. In that, I mean, I'm doing this work for 15 years myself, and I've given a lot of public information talks, naturalizing or normalizing that word, hypnosis, because we know that it can be a barrier, it can be a little bit scary, that word itself, hypnosis. And sometimes I'm asked the old question, can I be hypnotized? Excuse me, can I be hypnotized? Or you can't hypnotize me. But in the video, I kind of reframe that thinking to go, right, if you can put aside that word hypnosis for a moment and like focus on, have a look at the reality of the work that I'm doing here in my practice, is that I'm helping my clients connect with their subconscious minds, right?
Yeah.
To get the best out of themselves. So I'm empowering them to help themselves. I facilitate a process. So would you say then that you can't connect with your subconscious mind? So somebody might say, oh, I can't be hypnotized. But if you kind of like put that word aside and not put so much emphasis on that word, and in actual fact, look at it in terms of, right, I'm helping you connect with your subconscious mind, that human computer, the source of everything we do automatically, walking, talking, reading, writing, cycling a bike, driving a car.
That's a good
So
way to introduce it to
yeah.
clients. The word hypnosis limits what you can do in hypnosis, because people immediately, they perceive it in a particular way. It's not always the same way for each person, but that limits them. But when you haven't got that box around the thing and you're talking to them as you just did, I can actually help you access your subconscious mind and achieve things for yourself. I mean, there's a mystery about it, I know, but you don't want to be too much of like, I can do it for you, but I can help you realize it for yourself. How would you like to be able to do something like this, to take it home with you? And you're giving them a gift rather than holding that gift back and saying it belongs to me, really, but I'll share a little bit with you when you're here, which is completely wrong. I know there's some people who do that, but if we're always giving a gift to the client, it's empowering them. And if you phrase it in the way you've just described, it takes all of the pressure off and all of the fear away. It opens them up because they're curious. They're very curious about that.
Indeed.
I will rarely start doing a hypnotic induction by saying, now it's time to do the hypnosis. No, I never do that.
Yeah.
Never, ever. I'll start to do it as I'm
Yeah.
asking them questions about their problem. And it'll be something quite subtle. So if I'm talking to the client and they kind of look away, thinking about what I'm saying, for example, look away, I will pause a little bit and I might go, what's it? Then they come back and I carry on talking, and then they might look away again, or I might make them look away. I might look up myself, and then they look up to see what I'm looking at, and I'll go, And then if their blinking starts to slow down, slower blink reflex, as their blinking slows down, I'll go, They won't pick it up consciously. It's just, And at the same time, I'll blink my lids slowly as well. So now I'm non-verbally suggesting they go deeper. It's all very indirect, non-verbally and verbally. And then, of course, what you're doing is you're anchoring your and your eyelids, or even your exhalation, with their state of going into trance. So all you have to do is replicate it in front of them.
Sure.
And then they follow. They don't quite know why they're going into trance so easily. So they assume it's because they're a good hypnotic subject and they can be helped. And I think that's important.
Sure. I find myself that definitely in the last couple of years, I've come to realize that my state obviously is so important in terms of how effectively I help my clients. for example, if I have a client coming in that's highly kind of agitated and, nervous, anxious and so on, and, you can hear it in the tone of their voice. You can get the energy from them when you meet them in my one-to-one sessions here. And so I'm very aware that once I'm, calm, relaxed and focused, and, even lowering the tone of my voice, then after 5 minutes even, you can kind of physically see them relaxing themselves. And they're kind of starting to lower their tone, and they're kind of, that edginess is kind of smoothed out.
Mm. Mm.
And they probably don't know why, but it's something that I don't even think about myself too much. I'm just aware that, okay, I'm of the mindset, and I'm sure you are too, that like we need to be walking the walk and talking the talk, in terms of the work that we're doing, that we need to be, as hypnotherapists, making sure that we're in the best mindset and mental state possible. And in many ways, of course, in a trance of sorts, right? In the zone, so to speak, in that zone of focus, concentration, when, that it's almost like a button that I press once I go out and I greet my clients to bring them into the session here.
I think it's very important that as hypnotherapists, we do learn to experience that trance state. It's different from normally going into hypnosis, because then you kind of just let go. When you're the therapist, of course, you have to be very observant all the time. So a part of you has to be very kind of focused and observant, so you can utilize whatever's happening with the client, but at the same time be in a trance state. And I think an important part of that, apart from the observation utilization aspect, is that it's your own unconscious mind that's going to be giving you a lot of that information as to what to do.
Sure.
Through past experience. Intuition happens because of experience.
Sure.
And so that state helps that occur. And in addition to that, of course, you're mirroring, or you're modeling the state you want the client to be in. And all you need then is the context. If you did that in a restaurant over a cup of coffee, they're probably not going to go into hypnosis. But because of the context is, I've come here for hypnotherapy, those changes that you make, very subtle, imply this is the hypnosis, even if you're not saying anything hypnotic at that moment. And so context is very, very important. I think a lot of hypnotherapists talk too much, and they don't really need to. In fact, it's almost like waiting for the trance to occur, I think. And I encourage all hypnotherapists to actually hold back. They have the client sit there and, okay, you have to ask for information. You need to know what problem you're working with, etc. But when it comes to the hypnosis, rather than announce it, okay, put your hands on your lap, or just throw a few confusing words at them. It's like, or something like, what's happening now? You change the tonality. What's happening now? Have you noticed that yet? Implying that something happening they haven't noticed. So they're going to go inside and look for it, right? So all of these questions, which are suggestions, of course, and you just sit back and watch, pretty much, and they'll start to go in, and then you do the nonverbal. This is how Erickson worked. So it's different from the traditional hypnotherapy, and the advantages, as I've said, it means you're less likely to have failure with a client. But the other aspect of Erickson's work was he could utilize pretty much anything. So if a client is agitated, he'll be able to use that agitation to get them to go into hypnosis. I mean, I'll give you an example, okay? I had a woman come to see me, and she came and she said, I've been to six different hypnotherapists, and they couldn't hypnotize me. Okay.
Right.
I know a lot of my students would just run away and say, I'm out of here. And but me, I just thought, okay, what's she actually saying? She's saying that she believes she can be. She wouldn't go to 6 hypnotherapists unless she believed she could be hypnotized. right? She just wouldn't bother going. So a
Yeah.
part of her really believes that she can be, but she's been to 6 who couldn't do it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So immediately my therapeutic foot was in the door. I got the door open now, my therapeutic foot in there. And I said to her, I think I know why you couldn't go into hypnosis. And maybe I can tell you, how can I phrase it? And you pause, you hang back, you don't tell them. And she's wanting to drag it out of you, there's something that comes to mind. I'm pretty sure I know why, so you cause that frustration. So they grab hold of whatever you say because you're frustrating them. And I said, I bet, you see if I'm right. I bet. Okay, pausing again, holding back. I bet they all asked you to relax. Which is a standard thing to happen, right? And
Yeah.
she couldn't relax because she was getting more and more anxious. She
Yeah.
said, yes, that's right. That's right. Okay. So, and then I said to her, well, actually, to be honest, what they obviously didn't know is you need to be really, really anxious before you can go into a hypnotic state. Otherwise, you can't tell the difference, of that relaxation that happens when you go into trance. You wouldn't know the difference if you were relaxed to start with. You've got to be really anxious. But to be honest, I don't think you're anxious enough. That's what I said to her. So this is observation utilization. And so
Wow.
she's go, oh, no.
Brilliant.
So what I did, very simply, I said, okay, I want you to really try to be really anxious. So she's consciously trying to be anxious. Okay. So now the anxiety that she had previously, which was internal, she's now making it happen consciously, which means she's in control of it. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not happening to her. She's making it happen. She's choosing to have it. It's not a problem if you choose to have it. And so she's shaking her hands like this, I said, can you shake a bit more, shake a bit more? And this is what she was doing. And I said, notice how one hand is lowering to your lap and the other hand seems to be lifting a little bit on its own. She says, yeah. I said, don't go into hypnosis until your hand touches your face. You promise? Yeah, I promise. But see, hand touches the face, she goes straight down. All I did was utilize what she came in with and turned it around. And that's something that Erickson was so good at.
Brilliant.
He'd look, from the observation, he'd think, I could use that. I'll turn it around and I'll get her on my side. And that's, I think, the other, apart from several other contributions to hypnotherapy that he made, that's an important part of his work, was observation, utilization. Moment by moment, of course, because it's not the same with everybody. No two people are the same. So
Sure.
he would actually utilize whatever they came up with in the trance,
Sure.
turn it around in some way.
And of course, the work that we do can be the easiest, can be the most rewarding when a client comes in and they're at the threshold of making the change and, they're ready and, they're embracing the experience is brilliant. And it makes our lives a lot easier. But at times, of course, if somebody comes along that is overthinking things and a little bit skeptical and over analytical, what are the strategies and the methods you would hone in on for those type of clients?
Well, think about what is the nature of a problem. How is it maintained? Not so much how is it caused, because that can be any number of causes and reasons back there in time. And a lot of therapists spend time digging up the past, trying to find the reason, who to blame,
Sure.
when was it, child. Really, as I say, I'm Buddhist. And so in the 1990s, I decided to come and live in Thailand. I was still flying back and forwards to the UK as teaching at various hospitals, and we had a very, very big organization. And I wanted to see if there was some way that Buddhist principles could be dovetailed with Ericksonian hypnotherapy. And the thing I found out was if as a therapist, if you concentrate on the process, that is, what is maintaining this person's problem? What's maintaining it? And it's very, very simple. And it applies to every single problem. Once you know what's maintaining it, and it's simply this. Every problem starts with some kind of trigger. It can be something in the environment, external, like if you've got a phobia of dogs, you see a dog, for example, external trigger. Or it can be something you think of. You're going on a holiday, there's a phobia of flying. You're going on a holiday, you go to book the ticket, you're not on the plane, but already that trigger fires off the thought, and then that thought produces a negative feeling. Now, if it stopped there, kind of no problem, but it doesn't stop there. For most people, they then have a second thought, which is the thought about the horrible feeling. And that second thought produces more of the same feeling or a different negative feeling. And it loops round and round and round and round. So if you can get an imaginary pair of scissors and cut that loop at the top where the thought is and cut it at the bottom where the feeling is, the loop can no longer go round. So when people come in who overthink, well, actually, a lot of clients come in, they don't think they're overthinking, but their problem is because they're overthinking or they're trapped in this loop. I look at that as okay, let's see, can we do something with that using that model of therapy? Because that's the quickest way to sort this out if we can. Because if the brain can no longer produce the thoughts that produce the feelings because we've destroyed the loop in some way, then we've actually rewritten the hard wiring in the head that used to run that loop. We've overridden it with something new. So I look at it like that, and I would think probably 50% of the time I'm working with clients, I'll use that as an approach, because that usually, not usually, but 50% of the time, it'll deal with most problems. If that, and I'll teach it to the client as well, even sometimes they can do it for themselves, so they feel independent, they're not dependent on me or anybody else. If I need to do more, then I might do deeper work with hypnosis and any number of things with hypnotic phenomena, automatic writing, producing hallucinations or whatever, to all that stuff in all the phenomena. Yeah. But after many, many years, and it's a strange business, isn't it, really, if you think about it, Trevor, because we don't want to see our customers again. Once they come, we want them to go and be successful. Our success is when they don't come back.
Sure, exactly.
Rather than the other way around.
Yes.
So I always keep that in mind. And something else, which I think may be different from a lot of therapists, I never book second sessions or third sessions or fourth sessions. So a client will come, or online or whatever, will do the session. And often they say, well, when do you want me to come back? And I'll say, well, you tell me, but not now. Because, we've done some therapy for 1 hour. Go out into the world, because as you probably know, out into the world, there can be all kinds of triggers that maybe you haven't considered in the therapy session.
Sure.
That will, must continue the problem or kick it off again or something. And so you go out in the world and then come back to me, let me know how you're doing. If you want another session, just let me know anyway, either way. And that's how I always work. And I think, again, it's saying to the person, you may already have enough with what we've done there. And if they go out with that expectation, that itself becomes a hypnotic suggestion. It's a post-hypnotic suggestion. They have this anticipation.
Exactly. Exactly. Here in Ireland, just the lingo, I suppose, to just be nice is kind of like I was kind of brought up with that kind of terminology of saying to somebody, good luck, or, and the first couple of years I was doing this, I kind of learned that I kind of was mindful of what I was saying to my clients as they were leaving. Because I realized that no matter, I could have had a great session with them and I could sabotage the whole thing,
yes.
At the very last moment.
Hope it works.
Exactly, yeah. And say something like, give us a shout next week and let me know how it's going, And like, you're not consciously kind of be mindful of what you're saying and the suggestion that may imply. So now I'm very focused in on, until the client is gone and left the office, that everything that I say, there's an embedded suggestion in there somewhere, so that, they're going to be, and that's the kind of mindset I have. Like if you go to a mechanic, to get your car serviced, the mechanic isn't going to kind of check under the bonnet before you leave and kind of says, oh, well, check it next week now and just make sure that it's okay, kind of thing, that I think
it puts a doubt in your mind.
Yeah, it's the same principle applies, that, to be 120% confident that and believe that the change is made and the job is done when my clients are leaving here, especially when it comes to smoking cessation, you know, because that is my main area of focus. Just a question on, as I was listening to you there, that I wanted to ask you was, do you think that using mindfulness with our clients is a good practice, and especially in cases where a client could be overthinking things and have kind of that conscious mind kind of overactive, where a little bit of mindfulness work would, help them to just let a thought be a thought, and manage that kind of thought process, and be able to kind of focus in on the experience itself.
Yes, I mean, it will, as long as they have the patience to practice mindfulness. Mindfulness, let's look at it in context. Mindfulness comes from Buddhist meditation. And Buddhist meditation is very hard work. It's different from trance, where you just let go and let everything happen. You really have to develop your concentration, which is usually, on the breath is a traditional practice. And then learn to focus your concentration acutely on things, on the nature of reality, going into insight meditation. It's been kind of hijacked in a way as a kind of as a way of self-helping, self-healing. But in fact, it needs to, real mindfulness can take years to actually develop and practice. What it does, it allows people to create a space between the worry or thought and their response to it.
Sure.
But that's still only halfway there. It doesn't rewrite the hard wiring quickly enough.
Yeah.
It's not fast enough. You still need something therapeutic
Sure.
to bring about that change. It gives some distance and some, some relief. And if you practice it for a long time, fine. But it doesn't work fast enough in terms therapeutically.
Yeah. Yeah. I do find though that the whole concept of fractionation, where like every time we bring our clients into the hypnotic state to go deeper and deeper each time, that I find that if I do a little bit of mindfulness in the first session, just maybe even 5 minutes or 10 minutes, it helps my clients to kind of, relax, calm down a little bit, start to control their thought process a little bit more, and not to be overthinking things as much, because we've all had those clients where like even they're trying even too hard, to want to be fixed, can you help me, please, can you help me, and I really want this to work, and they're so intense about wanting it to work that they're not kind of letting go enough to be in the zone to allow the transformational changes to take place.
We again, going back to Erickson, he would utilize that. If somebody is very kind of academic, for example, wants to know what's going on, won't let go until they know what's going on, I will actually say to them, would you like me to teach you how I do this? Okay. That sets a frame that they're not going to be hypnotized yet. They're just going to be told how it happens and how I do it. So now they're focusing because they really want to know something. They really want something to have something. And of course, I'm hypnotizing them as I'm telling them how I do it. But it slips in the back door. They don't know that until they feel it happening to themselves. Because actually, I've taken their concentration or their focus, got it tied up in a knot there with what I'm saying, because they're really curious. But at the same time, I'm hypnotizing them. So what's happening? I'm getting that focus. It's like the old day with the look into my eyes thing, right? It's a little bit different, but it's the same principle. You're narrowing the conscious attention onto something that they really feel is important. And then you're slipping in the back door with these suggestions and hypnotic indirectly. And of course, they start going into trance. And I tell you a good way of doing that. I mean, you may not already do it. I don't know. You know about analog marking and embedded commands, maybe, and that's a technique, where you place emphasis on certain words or phrases which are hypnotic. Okay, So I will tell, if it's somebody like a client like that, I'll say, I'll tell you how I do this. And so I'll just briefly explain it now. So, you know, the guys watching this, whoever's watching it can have a go at it. Okay.
Sure.
I'm talking to the person and I'll say to them, okay, when I'm looking at your face, okay, and I'm talking to you, it's natural for me to explore your face to see how I'm responding, how you're responding to me. They nod their head. Okay. You've got agreement there. Okay. So I'm going to be looking at your face as I talk to you. And I want you to really, really look at how I'm looking at your face. So you're narrowing their attention down. And notice what I'm doing with my face. Okay, my eyes. I said, so you notice what I'm doing. When I look at the right side of your face, I'm just be talking about anything. But every time I look to the left side of your face, I'm using hypnosis.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I start. Okay. So I'm teaching. So that's what I do. So I tell them I'm going to look at the right side of the face and tell, but now I'm telling the story about what I do with my clients. But as I'm telling the story, of course, I start doing it. Okay. And they become aware because they're looking at my eyes. Every time I go to the left side of their face, they think hypnosis, 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 hypnosis.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So they're putting themselves into hypnosis
Yeah.
because they've been told this is what's going to happen when I work with them in the future. But often they say, my God, that's happening to me now.
Sure.
I can feel it happening, you know. So it's always, again, observation, utilization. So it's, again, there are always ways of working with clients, and all the different kinds of clients.
Sure. And I'm sure you more than anyone else are familiar with and aware of the power of the words that we use, that we could say the same sentence in, 5 or 6 different ways and get a different
Yes.
result depending on the emphasis we place on a particular word in a sentence. And this can be utilized, folks, not only by hypnotherapists out there, but also by parents as well. If you're looking to improve the behavior of your children
Have you
and
been
get a
having
result.
problems with your kids? Is this what you're
Yeah.
telling me? You're telling me you've been having problems with your kids.
Well,
You've been hypnotizing them.
but in a subtle way, But yeah, I mean, excuse me, of course. I mean, I have 2 children myself, 11 and 9, and I do. Why wouldn't I? I utilize the skills that I have and that I use for my clients here with them as well, to get the best out of them, because to me, it's only a positive thing. It
Yeah.
is. I mean, on the people will be skeptical and kind of go, isn't that manipulation of sorts? But it's only
What defines manipulation?
yeah,
What defines it? It's whose benefit is it for? Is this for your benefit or the other person's benefit? If it's for the children's benefit because they go to bed on time, for example, is it manipulation when they are benefiting from this communication? I think that's the way we have to look at it.
exactly.
The client benefits from our manipulation with words.
Exactly.
So it's for their benefit. It's not for us. So I don't see that as manipulation in the traditional sense of the word.
Absolutely. Stephen, I came across you on Facebook. So folks, I'd really recommend checking out Stephen's Facebook page. It's titled Stephen Brooks, British Hypnosis Research and Training Institute. And it's a fantastic page. When I followed it every so often, I know every couple of weeks, Stephen does a new video.
Every week, every
yeah.
week.
It was every week, that answers a very commonly asked and practical questions that you get in. And I have looked at a number of those videos, and I've taken 1 or 2 of them, Stephen, here and taken a note of them. Would you be open to answering 1 or 2 of them here on the podcast?
Go ahead.
Great
Go ahead.
stuff.
Go ahead.
Right. A very interesting one that definitely will benefit the listeners and the viewers of the show is how to increase a client's receptivity to hypnosis.
That was a recent one I put up.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Well, there are lots of different ways to do this. What is receptivity? It's a kind of, if you were having a conversation with somebody in a group of people, you might find one person who's leaning towards you, maybe head slight to one side, listening. Okay. And maybe they're not blinking. They're just listening like this. So metaphorically, they're on the edge of their seat. They're all ears, that kind of state. And most likely their pupils will be dilated more than the other people in the group. They're already in a trance. So if you can create that state in your clients in any way possible, maybe with a metaphor or a story, or just even creating some confusion and then delaying resolving that confusion, for example, or even by modeling the trance, dilating your own pupils. You can practice dilating your own pupils. It's very easy. When you look at somebody, just look at their ear instead of their eyes. They'll see you looking at them, but they'll think something's a bit strange. So you're getting them to ask questions themselves. What you're saying to them inside with this, the answer's not coming from outside. They're going to have to try and find the answer inside. So you need to get them to go inside. That can be with specific questions to get them to think about things. Thinking, just looking up and thinking, is a trance state. Getting them to talk about something they enjoy doing, leisure interests they may have. It's a trance state. All leisure interests have trance associated with them, regardless of what they are. So your goal is to get them to shift their awareness from outside to inside. So first of all, what you need to do is create that kind of environment where they start to drift off naturally without you doing anything formally hypnotic, that looks like hypnosis. So you create that kind of sense with the questions, with the information gathering, with the ambiguity, whatever you're doing, even non-verbally, as I say, with pupil dilation or whatever. If they take a deep breath and go, you do it at the same time. So you're kind of matching it, but then you're starting to control their breathing, if you like. Second thing you've got to do is give them some experience of some hypnotic phenomena. That develops receptivity very, very well. It doesn't have to be something huge. It can be something simple as the blink reflex starting to slow down. And you just comment on that. So you're pointing something out. Now, you haven't asked them to change their blinking. They're doing it because they're starting to go into an altered state slightly. But pointing it out, you can say that, it's very curious how, as I'm talking to you, your blink reflex has slowed down. Yet you didn't really notice how that was happening, did you? But that is happening. You notice it now, and often they'll stop blinking like that because they'll come out of it, okay? So, and you can be curious when that's going to happen the second time. It might even happen 3 times before you go into trance. So you utilize whatever they're giving you, like you'll be blink reflex, something like that.
Sure.
And so that's hypnotic phenomena. Okay. Maybe they've got their hands on their laps and they haven't moved their hands or fingers for the first 10, 15 minutes. You can say, I'm certain that you haven't been thinking about your left hand. Now they're going to acknowledge that. They're going to think, no, I haven't been. Okay. Yet you're thinking about that now.
Yeah.
Are you not? Are you not? And his language again, are you not? Because now they're thinking about their left hand.
Yeah.
Are you not? Are you not? So you say not, you say the word nod. You haven't been thinking about that. Or you're thinking about it now. Are you nod? And they'll nod their head.
Right.
And you didn't even realize you just nodded your head. How did you do that without knowing how to do that? You see, and you're sending them inside all the time. They're questioning what's going on. Yeah. But now you know that you nodded your head. I'm right. Am I nod? They'll nod their head again. Say, yes, there you go. And often they'll smile because they'll just realize, what the little game you've been playing.
Yeah.
And so you're creating an atmosphere and a context where it becomes easier to go into trance and more receptive. And, you know, and they always talk about in hypnotherapy, building up, what Erickson used to, or building up phenomena, little tiny things to start with, like the blink reflex, or even eye catalepsy where they can't open their eyes, you know. But you've got to be careful if you're testing that and they just open their eyes. You can only do that when you really know they're not going to be able to. So you build it up in layers and levels. That all of that builds up receptivity to hypnosis.
Yeah, sure. And also I find as well from my intake form that I get my clients to complete, it gives me a lot of really good information then that I can utilize with them, whether it be the successes they've had in their life, you know, what their likes and dislikes are, you know, what their passions are, so that, you know, you can kind of gently like guide the session, the conversation, the flow towards what makes them tick.
Yeah.
You know, in a way that's right for them. Because one of the things that I've learned over the years doing this is that, you know, to make it focus in on every client is different, but not to be imposing a structured process that I have, you know, on my clients. You know, not leading them down staircases or bringing them to beaches or forests, or because, you know, each individual client that comes will have their own imaginations to go where their special place, their powerful place is, which, you know, can be completely different from, you know, for everyone. So
there's a danger for those therapists that use those kind of stock places like a beach, for example.
Sure.
It's very easy to make a mistake when you're the therapist and start describing stuff that you'd expect on the beach.
Yeah, exactly.
It may be a complete mismatch of the beach they're seeing in their head. You might be describing sandy beach, and there they are in Brighton, in Sussex, which is all pebbles.
But they might be afraid of water.
They may be afraid of water. Yes. And you feel like going for a nice swim.
Yeah, exactly. So I have another question here as well. And this one I was very interested in because, as I mentioned to you, one of my areas of expertise that I specialize in is folks smoking cessation, 90-minute session, and my clients are leaving smoke-free, breathing fresh air, feeling fantastic. And one of the questions on that that you answered recently is what to do when smokers relapse. I know I watched that video and I was fascinated by it because you had also tips in it to keep, for the client to keep kind of a diary that can assess how they're feeling, and in terms of the numbers of 1, 2, and 3, and you know, it gives you an idea for how motivated they are to make the change, and are they at the threshold, and so on. Would you like to answer that question first?
Yes. I think smoking is a symptom that helps the client deal with another symptom quite often. People who, how can I put it? People who smoke a lot do so because it actually helps them cope with something else in their lives quite often. You probably noticed that yourself. It could be anxiety, or relationship problems, or whatever, problems at work or whatever. And so they get into that habitual behavior, which is why sometimes when, you know, working in an office, telephone rings, someone lights up a cigarette because they've got to deal with an important call. It seems the way of coping. So I like to kind of think of these kind of problems that people bring in, these symptoms of these problems, as the client's inappropriate way of giving themselves therapy. So if it's that kind of client, what I I'm trying to do with that client is to find an alternative to the smoking that's going to help them deal with their cause of the actual problem of why they're smoking, in order for them to have some way of coping as a non-smoker or smoking less cigarettes, whilst we work on the real problem that smoking is somehow helping them cope with. So That's something that I like to look at. If somebody comes in and they are a kind of a social smoker, and really they're just coming in because they want someone to tell them they no longer smoke, you know, that sort of smoker where they could give up themselves, but they just want to do the session. It kind of gives them that extra sort of certainty that they're going to be successful. Then I won't necessarily use that approach.
Sure.
We'll go for the actual smoking. But as you just said, what I do is normally not. I tend to do it in one session now but what I used to do is I'd give them. We'd do the information gathering. Sometimes, half a session or a whole session or a brief session, getting information about their smoking habit, where they smoke, especially anchors, things that go on around in their life that triggers smoking. And they'll better tell me a few things. So I created a form, like an A4 piece of paper. And on that piece of paper, I'd have 7 columns, not Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, 1, 2, 3, because if they came in on a Friday, you have to give them 2 forms, So just 1 to 3, 2 to 7. And each column would be divided into 3. And those 3 mini columns would be time of day, context, what they're doing, what's happening, having a coffee or something, and how much they want to smoke, 1 to 3, how severe, how desperate they are or not, and tell them to keep it with their pack of cigarettes and to fill it in before they smoke. So this is what's happening. They're out in the world now, and they know they've got to fill in this form before they smoke. This is already disrupting all of those unconscious cigarettes they smoke. They just reach out and pick up a cigarette without thinking about it and on their computer or whatever. This disrupts that process, and it makes them make a conscious decision. Do I really want this cigarette? Am I desperate enough to really want this cigarette? And so usually when they come back, what you have is they'll have cut down their smoking often by 2/3 automatically, because they've become mindful and aware of the ones they didn't need, and they've chosen consciously. Brilliant. Okay, so now you've got less cigarettes to deal with. But what you've got there is all the ones, or 3, whatever they use it. 3 is the most severe, for example. You can see time of day. You can see what the context was, having a coffee or whatever it was, had an argument or whatever it was. And you know that those particular events or contexts are what will make them relapse. They're the ones you have to kind of spend time on. It makes our life a lot easier now because you have all that information, and then you can work specifically on that.
Excellent, excellent. And another tip that you gave in that video, I think, is that if they do have the association of having a cup of coffee with a cigarette, that you can change that to a glass of orange juice.
Yeah, you break up those associations. Yeah, and you can even put that into your hypnotherapy with hypnosis to actually say the cigarettes will taste disgusting with orange or something, a diversion. If you work that way, you can use that as well. So you can use hypnosis to reinforce the disruption of those associations the person has.
Great stuff, great stuff. And one last question for you. Indirect and direct suggestions. What are the benefits of each, and when to use, when to know, when to use?
Okay. Well, let's talk about direct. Milton Erickson would be direct, but not in an authoritarian way. But he would be direct in terms of being emphatic. Okay, so someone sitting in a chair there, and he'd say, I want you to just listen to the sound of my voice. And as you do this, I'd like you to notice how many times, and you can count them, how many times you just drift away somewhere else until you give up counting. As an example, I've made that up, okay? As an example. And so he's emphatic. He's being direct in that sense, but he doesn't say you will stop smoking. You will no longer do this. You will no longer do that. Not that kind of direct. So I've taken that on board. And so sometimes I will, Ericksonian hypnotherapy is artfully vague a lot of the time, but sometimes you need to give the client a particular structure of things, something they have to do. especially if you're giving tasks, because Erickson used to give tasks all the time as well, sometimes in hypnosis, sometimes at the end of the session. Go and do this, and this can happen. And a good book, if you want to read about tasking, Ericksonian tasking, is a book called Uncommon Therapy by Jay Haley, Jayhaley, I think, Jay Haley. Great book. It's full of like tasks that Erickson used to give people. And then you have to be kind of very, very clear and precise in what you want them to do, because they've got to go away and do that task in some way.
Sure.
So direct in that sense. I think Erickson was very rarely direct doing inductions, but if somebody was in a very, very deep hypnotic state, he knew as well as anybody else, he didn't have to be indirect. He could just tell somebody to do something, because they're highly receptive at that particular time. And sometimes you can just do that. So you do both.
Excellent. And I find myself that if I have a number of sessions with a client, that it's really more in the first session that I utilize the indirect suggestion more so, because once, I build up the trust and the rapport, and they get into the zone where, they need to be, and they're really getting the benefits from the work that we're doing, and they're experiencing that hypnotic feeling, then you can kind of like go with the flow and kind of be more direct that way. But
yes. Yeah.
Stephen, it was great having you on the podcast. I've been fascinated listening to you, and time has flown. So is there any words of wisdom you would like to share with myself and my viewers and listeners before you say goodbye here today?
I think, for that 1 hour or however long you're with your client, you need to get in the mindset that that person sitting opposite you is the most important person in your life for that duration. Afterwards, you go home and have a cup of tea, whatever, you let it go. Yeah. But for that duration, if you think of that, this is the most important person in my life, you are going to make so much of a commitment to doing a good job. If you find yourself, as a lot of trainee therapists do, thinking all the time, am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? That's kind of selfish. It's about them. It'd be better just to not even care what you do and just open your mouth, and whatever comes out, trust it, because you're still giving it to that person. But when people become very obsessed, therapists become obsessed, is that the wrong thing to do? Is that the right thing to do? Record your sessions, listen back afterwards if you want. But while you're with that client, if you have that mindset, this is the most important person in my life, then that will become a habit for you. Yeah. And you'll have that attitude. It'll just happen by itself, because your own unconscious mind or subconscious will say, okay, I'll switch on that particular way of thinking. And that, I think, means you'll look back over your life and you think, I couldn't have done any better. That was an amazing life. I couldn't have done any better. But to look back and regret and think I didn't do enough would be terrible. So I think that would be the last thing I'd say.
Excellent. Brilliant. Words of wisdom for sure. Stephen, thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast here today. Thanks a million.
Thank you for inviting me.
And I'd love to have you back on in the future at some point, because I had a list of questions there to ask you, and we only got through a couple of them. There's more.
It'll be a pleasure.
But we've only so much time here today, folks. But look, thanks very much again. Keep up the great work, and sure, keep in touch.
Thank you.
Take care, my friend. So just stay there for a second. Okay, folks, that was and is the fantastic Stephen Brooks. What a great gentleman. And, he's a fantastic hypnotherapist. He's just brilliant. And I could talk to him all day. I really enjoyed the discussion that I have had with him here on the podcast today. And I hope you have enjoyed it too. So until the next episode of the podcast, be good to yourselves. Take care, and we'll see you all again soon. Take care, folks, and we'll see you next time.